Today on the Coach Boy podcast, we have a very special guest. He was a two-time state placer in the state of Florida, where he took those talents to the next level, competing at Northern Iowa Area Community College, where he compiled a record of 52-9 and was a two-time All-American. He then took those talents to the next level, competing at University of Northern Iowa, where he was an NCAA qualifier. Today, he's returning back to his college, where he is now the head women's coach at NIAC. Today, we welcome Coach Basil Minto to the Coach Boy podcast. With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coaches Why podcast.
That was my Coaches Why.
Welcome back to another episode of the Coaches Why podcast. We have a very, very special guest today. This gentleman, me and him have kind of went back probably the last 2 or 3 years as some of the other coaches have been on here. We've kind of talked a little bit about getting kids to the next level. Today we have Coach Basil Minto joining the podcast today. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good, man. Good. Yeah. And you're up at Northern Iowa Area Community College, correct? NIACC.
Yep.
That's a mouthful right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I know we kind of spoke a little bit before, but we got snow today. What's it like living up in that that Midwest, north central part of the country right now?
We talked before the interview, like I'm originally from Florida. So, it's a love-hate thing because I love the sport so much, but when that cold hits, it's something different. But, I've been up here since 2011, so I'm used to it, but you don't really get used to the winters. It's crazy as that sounds.
No matter how accustomed you are to it, it's still always going to be cold.
Right. And the state's pretty temperamental, like the stock market. It's up and down.
Yeah, I understand that completely. So I know, and I'll save that question for later because I know what brought you from Florida up there, and I want you to kind of dive into that here in a little bit, and that kind of leads to my first question I like to ask is, before we talk about like your coaching journey and before we talk about you as the coach, I would love I'll pass it over to you to let everybody know who you are, kind of where you grew up, and when you got involved, not only in wrestling, but, just kind of sports in general.
Earlier on, like my original sports I was mainly interested in was football. I was tiny though. I was 126 pounds my freshman year. I didn't really do much sport. I didn't do many sports. I mean, I did middle school track and field and but going into high school, football was my main objective. I wanted to just see how good I can get in that. And like I said, so I didn't do wrestling until I got to late in high school. That's when I started wrestling. And the main reason why I did wrestling was to get better for football.
Okay.
I mean, as those football rosters, you'll have like 100 something kids on there. And I kind of felt like I was getting lost in the sauce a little bit. I wasn't really, and it's not a knock on my football coaches. You can only do so much.
Right.
But
very much so.
I remember it was my best friend, Brett, my freshman year. He was telling me, he's like, hey dude, let's go out for wrestling. You're going to get big and jacked by your senior year. And, it's going to teach you how to hit better for football. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll never forget it. My sister, Christina, she says, oh, you don't want to do that. All the wrestlers on campus are weirdos. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not exactly the most normal dude in the world. So, I mean, it sounds right up my alley. And Coach Phillips, Coach Pedersen, Coach Vasquez, and Coach DeRue, Coach Santiago, they really embraced me at Mariner High School in Cape Coral, Florida.
Okay.
They nurtured me. They took me in, and they almost became like second parents, if you will.
Right.
And but yeah, they were the ones that really pushed me on to go into college, because I placed twice in the state in Florida. I placed fourth 2 times, and then I got a couple of letters from I can't remember what schools they were. One was a Ivy League, I think it was like Concordia, and they said, due to your success in the classroom and on the wrestling mat, we've considered you as a no, Columbia. Sorry, not Concordia.
Oh, Columbia. Okay.
And I'm like, I have terrible grades. I don't know why I'm getting this letter. And like, again, my high school coach stepped in and he said, "Hey, Basil, what's the worst that happens? You can always go home. If college doesn't work out for you, you can just always go home." And I'm like, yeah, that's a good mindset to go about it. And I Coach Kelly, he kept calling me every single day. "Hey, Basil, come up here. Have you got your financial aid done? Have you applied yet? Have you done this? Have you done that?" And like I told you, he called me 5 times and then called me 5 times more for me to finally get things done. And I came up here. The first thing I remember was the smell. Because it was, I think, right around like harvest time, and I remember this. I'm just like, oh my gosh, what? I'm smelling farms, and I'm in Florida. I'm like, I don't smell this stuff. I'm used to ocean air.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the smell of up here that kept me up here so long, but yeah, I wrestled at Northern Iowa for 2 years. I was a 2-time All-American, placing 5th 2 times, and this is at 184. And then I think it was Coach Randy Pugh at UNI. He saw me wrestle at the William Penn Open, and I was wrestling like an Iowa State guy at a junior college, and I was wrestling in the finals, and I beat him. And that's when UNI started to really get a hold of me, and they recruited me there, and I was in and out of the lineup my junior year, and then I started majority of my senior year, and I qualified for the Division I national tournament in 2015. And Steve Kelly, Don Barry, they kept calling me to come back here. "Hey, come help us out." And I was like, well, Mason City's always been good to me. So I moved back here in 2017, and that's when my college coaching career started.
To kind of go back to what you were mentioning about, like, you got recruited, if you would, out of football into wrestling. I've had I've had a conversation with the football coach, and he was a big powerlifting guy. He really enjoys that side of things, but he also believes that wrestling is it's a piece that will help you whichever way, right? If you're a football guy, it'll help you in certain areas. If you're in whatever, like maybe a winter or in a spring sport, it'll help you there. And I know that you're the women's coach, right, as the head coach, but you're also assisting this year, is your first year assisting the men's program, correct?
No, I've been assisting the men since I started here, assisting the men's in 2017.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, I've been assisting the men since 2017, and then until I took over the head women's role in 2021.
Gotcha. Okay. So whenever it comes to like recruiting side of things, right? You're a dual sport, multi-sport athlete. Is that something that you look for whenever you are in like your recruiting process? Like, are you looking? I'm sure it's kind of if there's somebody who's dedicated to only wrestling, right, all year round, and they're doing all the things, obviously you're still going to have them on the radar. But does having somebody who's doing a multi-sport in high school stand out to you whenever you're recruiting somebody?
I guess it just depends on the athlete, because you see some younger athletes, and they bite off more than they can chew, and so they're trying to do everything and not really succeeding at one thing. So I like athletes that are multi-sports. I think it's better on their bodies to not just do the continuous repetition. I think it's harder on their joints. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it just depends on the athlete, because you'll have these stellar athletes that are a state champ in wrestling and an All-American linebacker, and then they run track, and they're getting scholarships for all 3 of them. Don't get me wrong, those athletes are few and far between, but
right.
I do like an athlete that's staying busy. They say idle hands are the devil's plaything. So, as long as they're staying busy, I'm fine
with that.
Yeah,
for sure. Now going back to the other thing, the second question I had off of what you mentioned about your timeline and your time is whenever you went to UNI after going JUCO. I usually ask, like, what was your recruiting process like? I think you did a pretty good job of diving into that, but when you got the opportunity to go from JUCO to a 4 year, was UNI kind of like the only one that stood out, or was there other colleges that realized your potential, especially after what you did in the JUCO? Not only at that tournament, but as like a qualifying and doing everything you did at the actual national tournament. What was your process like from college to the next level? Was that like the only one you wanted to go to, or did you actually consider others?
Well, I originally wanted to go to Iowa State. That was
Okay.
that was where I originally wanted to go. Um, I had a few other schools that got a hold of me quite a bit. Grandview, they're an NAIA school, powerhouse in
Yep.
NAIA. Um, Concordia, they're an NAIA in Nebraska. William Penn, another NAIA. Virginia Tech. This is
Hmm.
when Kevin Dresser was out there. He's now the head coach at
Oh,
Iowa State.
yep.
They flew me out there to go look at the program, and I was honestly considering going there. The school's beautiful, but I think my GPA wasn't high enough to get in, so I'd have to go to a 2 year school for a semester before going there, and so
Gotcha.
that was kind of a big deciding factor. Um, but when I went to UNI, it was a smaller feel, and it kind of reminded me. I mean, it's not really comparable to Nyack, but it was just a smaller feel, like a big city but smaller feel.
Right.
And I vibe well with the coaches and the guys on the team. Um, and I like this. I like the fact that I was staying in state.
Yeah.
So it was a thing where it just the stars aligned, and that's just where I ended
That's
up going. And
right.
I don't regret it. I don't regret it. Doug Schwab's been doing amazing things for the program of UNI. Randy Pugh, and Tolly Thompson, he was there. I had amazing coaches, and I'm
Yeah.
so happy that I went there.
And so after you got to spend all your time, right, like you were in high school in Florida, which, and I don't know if this is, I truly think this, right? I think that every kind of demographic of the country, or not demographic, geographic location of the country may have a little bit of a different wrestling style, right? Like you might see a little bit more physical in one area versus might be a little bit more technical. I don't know if you would agree with that, but you obviously had different. You had your Florida experience, and then you had your JUCO experience, and then you had your Division I experience with all these different coaches. Do you think that a lot of those things that you learned throughout your time, right, do those really influence you in a lot of the things you do when it comes to your practice planning, or your when you travel, or whatever, those type of things as well? I know, sure, there might be a little bit of a mindset thing, but do you take a lot that you learned and utilize that every day, or have you kind of figured out a way to is it more of Coach Minto's way?
So you're meaning it as a coach.
Correct. Yeah, as a coach, correct.
As a coach, that's a great question. The way I look at it is, I mean, you said coming from Florida, I'm a big melting pot of that, because
Right.
not to break off into something else here, they call Florida's one of the biggest melting pots, like it's not even considered the South. So so I go into practice, a lot of the days I do have a practice plan going into it, but my main thing I work on, and which what I work on with my athletes is their weaknesses.
Mm.
So, it's, I think, and that's one thing, a lot of coaches do. I wouldn't say that I take more from Florida or Iowa. It's building upon what athletes know already, and
Right.
then fixing the mistakes behind it. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that I take more from Florida than I do
One or the
Iowa.
other.
Yeah, it's wrestling's wrestling regardless of what state you're in, right? So
True. Yeah. I mean, I definitely understand that. So when did you decide? By the way, I do appreciate the dive in and kind of, especially talking about where you're from and your timeline there. But when did you decide that coaching is what you wanted to do, right? Like, was there something was there somebody, was there a situation, or was it just something that you've, kind of over time decided this is what you wanted to do? But, when did you decide that coaching's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life?
Well, I just happened to kind of fall into it because I was living in Cedar Falls after I graduated, and I had a construction job. It paid decently well, and then I transferred over to a maintenance job that for a huge a rental company in Cedar Falls, and I remember I was in UNI's sauna, and then I was looking online that Clarksville, their head coach, had just left. Clarksville is a small town. I want to say north. I'm probably getting it off a little bit. It's a small town outside of Cedar Falls.
Okay.
Excuse me. And their high school head wrestling coach had just left, and so they were considering canceling their season if they couldn't find a coach. So my first introduction to coaching was that, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine being a senior in high school and my season getting canceled just because of the fact that there was no coach. So I was like, all right, freshly graduated from UNI, I stepped in as a high school head wrestling coach at Clarksville, and that's when the itch started. That's where I was like, I started to get the bug for it, and that was
how you got into it.
That was how I got into it, and then I realized the impact I can have on athletes, like the same impact my coaches had on me. Because you emulate, people you respect, and so the biggest people, the people I respect most in my life are my coaches. So yeah.
So you started at the high school, and that's how it fell into your lap. And so, what was your timeline like? So, how long were you there for? And then, when did you make that jump from Clarksville to I guess really what's your timeline from there to now? School wise.
Yeah. So there was an assistant coach who started my sophomore year at Nyack. We call him the old man coach, Don Barry. He's now retired. He actually called me and he says, "You're coaching? We need a heavyweight coach in here." And he's a very high energy guy. If you ever get a chance to meet him, one of the nicest guys you ever meet. And he called me. He got a hold of Steve. They called me, and that's kind of how that just kind of worked out. And then I was a head coach at Clarksville 15-16, and then I took over assistant coaching the men's in 17-18.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're almost a decade into this thing. What was the biggest change? Which I know you just kind of fell into the high school role, but what was or whether it's one or multiple, but what was like the biggest, I wouldn't say shock, but thing that you may not have realized when you got to the college level that you may not know whenever you're an athlete, being under somebody, but you got to experience when you got to actually coach collegially.
Yes. That's an interesting question. So I coach junior college, and I love my junior college kids. I absolutely, men and women, I love them.
Of course.
The biggest thing I've noticed is so like it's different when you coach JUCO compared to like a 4-year school, and at a 4-year school, because the reason why you go to JUCO is develop your skills, or you come in with maybe some lower grades, or it's developmental, right, or grades. The reason, a lot of the time, not all the time, but I would say the biggest thing is, because that's the reason why I came there. It was developmental and grades. But I'd say the biggest jump is me realizing just how much I had to, how much I'm stepping in,
right.
to help them out in some senses, whether it be personal, academically. As a coach, I mean, you wear a bunch of different hats.
Of course.
So, that was, because there's a lot of times they don't have parents there. So
Oh,
they're
of
coming to
course,
you
yeah.
with,
It's first time away and all that stuff too.
yeah. So there are a lot of adult questions. And when I first started, I was a much younger adult, 10 years ago. So I was like, let me ask Steve. Let me ask Steve about this. I'm not sure, man. So, um, it was if that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. And whenever it comes to like, right, so like you went from high school to a JUCO to a 4 year, and so as you're talking to all these kids that you are getting in, as you're recruiting, and they're coming to to wrestle under you, I'm assuming just like anywhere else, your goal is to get them their degree from your school to then get them to the next level. I know not every kid wants to, but that's kind of, I would assume, your first goal. How is it? What have you found to be kind of like the key to getting a kid to do those things? I mean, what is your and this may be maybe like a culture question or like success question later on that I ask, but for the most part, as you're doing this every day and you're doing this for the last X amount of years, what have you kind of found to be like the key for a kid to actually, getting their degree and getting to the next level? And yeah, I guess we can just keep it there.
Yeah. So a lot of it's just doing the right things. Doing the right things as a student, doing the right things as an athlete, because if you don't have the grades, you're not gonna, you don't have the grades, you don't graduate from a JUCO, you're not gonna move on. That's first and foremost. So, grades, and then obviously, which it makes it easy on me if a kid's not out in the dorms or something partying.
Yeah.
You don't want them, I mean, you want a kid to have fun, but it's you're here for school and you're here for wrestling.
Yep.
You only get, this is the same thing I tell them, you get 4 years to do this. You got the rest of your life to have fun. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying wrestling isn't fun. You got the rest of your life to party and do all that other stuff. So, that's the two main things I look at: first, grades, and then, how are they socially?
Yep.
If their Instagram has a bunch of stuff on them doing what, partying,
Dumb
not doing what they're
stuff. Yeah.
supposed to be doing. So that's a key indicator.
And does that play a factor into like when you're recruiting a kid too? Like, I've talked to other junior college coaches, and I find JUCO fascinating, right? Like you
Yeah,
mentioned, whatever whatever the reason is for them to go to your school, right? You can be, I had a coach say like JUCO can be like a trampoline for somebody, or it could be a humbler. It could really humble you in whatever aspect you might be looking at. But I find it really fascinating that when you're recruiting a kid, right, you may not actually get all the time in the world to develop somebody like you would if you went to that 4 year school, right? Like if you and I right out of high school, you would have 4 years, maybe 5 years with redshirt with a coach to really get to blah 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 whatever. Versus a junior college, you almost have to do it right now. You don't have all the time in the world to do things like that. So, what's something you look for in a kid, right? Because you're obviously still building a culture, you're trying to build success, all that stuff. But when you're out and about looking for a kid, what are some of the things that you're looking for, and what are some of the things that stand out to you to have them come right in? I guess the best way to put it is, what are you looking for when you recruit a kid to come in and be able to perform in the 2 years?
a lot of it's just grit. You know, Grit. If a kid's willing to go out and get carried in on their shield, that's honestly what I'm looking for. A kid that's not scared to go up against the number one guy in the country, because when you're at a JUCO, we're wrestling D1s, we're wrestling D2s, D3s, NAIAs, and and apparently, a lot of the JUCO kids, they're beating a lot of the D2, D3, NAIA guys, and
Yeah.
JUCO's tough, man. You get
Yeah.
So, can you repeat that question again? Sorry,
Oh
I
no,
went a
you're
little.
no, you're good. No, you're good. I will repeat it, but I will say this to you. I think that JUCO is a place where Actually, my mind just went blank too because I just had like three questions come up as well. But I think that we'll go back. We'll go back to the question I asked you. So like whenever you're recruiting a kid, whenever you're out and about looking for an athlete, what are you looking for in an athlete to be able to come in and, perform for you right away? Like, are you looking at how they wrestle in high school? Are you looking at personality? Are you looking at, having conversation with their coaches and how they maybe react to wins and losses? I mean, what are you looking for in an athlete whenever you know you only have 2 years with them, to get them not only to be successful with you, but also hopefully to the next level?
Yeah. Grit and being able to be coachable.
Yeah.
Grit and being able to be
Coachable is
coachable.
important.
Yeah, that's huge. Those are, if you're coachable, you're willing to learn, and you're gonna learn if you're coachable. And then
Yep.
grit's something you just have it. And
Yep.
so
It's hard to teach that.
Yeah.
So like junior college, I mean, what do you love about coaching? And what do you dislike about it? Is there anything that you dislike about coaching? And you can answer this in two ways. You can either answer it on like being at a JUCO level, or you can answer it on like a general coaching term level.
So I mean, at the JUCO level, I love the progression of, I love to watch these kids progress onto something, to a 4-year school, or progress on and be a functioning member to society. But that's the biggest thing, that I love. The thing that I dislike most about it is I just, I work with this kid from a freshman to a sophomore year, and he's right at the cusp of that breakthrough. And, it's, they go to a 4-year school and hopefully they take off, or,
Right.
The 4-year school just doesn't work out for them. I've had so many athletes throughout my 10 years saying, man, I wish Nyack was a 4-year school. I really wish Nyack was a 4-year school. And, but it's, we're not. And so
Yeah, of
these
course.
are just training wheels, man. So you gotta,
Yeah,
so if that answers your question,
it does.
I love to see the progression of the athletes. I'd love to see them go on. I'd like to, I absolutely love that. And so another thing is it's a revolving door.
Mm-hmm.
JUCO, it's one in, one out consistently. So you're consistently recruiting, and I love the aspect of recruiting, but it's tough, especially in the state of Iowa, because you got how many JUCOs? I think we get 8 or 9 junior college, and then how many D3s, and then D2s, and then Division I. So it's, to recruit in the state of Iowa, it's hard.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, do you guys kind of, what is your pipeline? I know you may have talked about getting kids maybe from the Southwest up there and things like that. But if you don't know wrestling, go look up Iowa wrestling. This might be a biased question. I had a coach on here who wrestled at PA, and he said PA was the toughest state in the country to wrestle at. But so he likes to wrestle in the, and a lot of his kids are also from that Northeast. But Iowa is it's a top. I'm not going to say anything because I'm the host, so I can't put biases out there. But it's a very good state for wrestling. So like when you're doing your recruiting side of things, are you looking for? Is Iowa your first place you look for those type of kids, and then you branch out? Or I mean, what is your process to trying to get kids in here, or in there, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of course I'm looking in state. I'm looking. I want to get in-state talent. For men and women, I want to get in-state talent. That's what has people come to dual meets and come to our tournaments, and that's what gives us a bigger following here at Nyack. But that's just to get every stud here from the state of Iowa. That's it's not really likely. But I being from Florida, a good portion of our roster is from. I recruit heavily in Florida. I feel like Florida is a very untapped pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a girl from Canada. We've had a guy from Australia. I mean, we're recruiting anywhere. So it's
whoever fits your mold. Whoever fits your mold, you're willing to go after.
Yes.
So like when it comes to your, I guess to answer, or I should say to kind of follow up with you on that. or actually even going back to what you mentioned, so like a lot of your tournaments you mentioned are in state, or excuse me, you're going to like these big level tournaments, right? You're going everywhere, and I'm assuming that's for not visuals but observation, right? You want to get your kids seen, right? All right, so do you have a lot of relationships with 4-year schools? You know, are they reaching out to you, or are you reaching out to them, or is it just like in your sense where you just happened to be wrestling at that tournament and you did really well there, and that coach, you know, caught you at that time? You know, what's the process, quote unquote, to get a kid from a 2-year to a 4-year? You know, after you've did all your recruiting, after they've spent time with you, you know, when do you start looking to get them out, and what's the process like for that?
Well, normally it's the 4-year schools that are, like I said, it's a good mixture of what you said. Because the 4-year schools, if we have one of our JUCO guys wrestling a D2 or D3 guy in the finals, and they beat him, that that D3 school or the NAIA school is going to be like, oh crap, we want this kid here.
Yeah.
So that they're like a good coach is going to be wanting to be recruiting that kid.
Right.
So if it's a kid that's maybe not winning all those opens, and that's why when the grade thing comes into side, then it's like, hey dude, if some kids just want to be a part of the sport of wrestling, and they
Yep.
and who's to say when their breakout match happens? It could be their senior year. They were just
Whatever the situation is, it just took till a certain time to get to that point, right?
right. And so they just didn't start for 3 years, and they ended up keeping their grades up, and just they stepped in, and hey, the limelight's on them now, and they're ready to compete. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, was there ever a coach in your life who made a massive impact? And who was he or she, and why did they have such a big impact on you as an athlete,
I mean, I
or
can't
in
just
general?
I couldn't just limit that to one coach.
And you're good. You can give as many shout outs as you want. I've had coaches go on 4 or 5, and some just say one. So you can give as many shout outs as you'd like.
Like I said, Coach Phillips and Coach Patterson, they were my high school head wrestling coaches. Or Coach Patterson was the assistant, and Coach Phillips was the head. And yeah, they helped turn me into a young adult. Like I said, they took their time to mold me. They were patient. And yeah, like if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And then coming in the junior college route, Steve Kelly, the exact same thing, but obviously hands off the reins a little bit more, because I'm an adult. He helped the same thing. He helped mold me. And Doug Schwab, Randy Pugh, those even Tully Thompson, they the same thing. I mean, so I can't, like I said, I can't pinpoint one coach, but if the biggest, I know the biggest change, that coaches that has probably one of the biggest impact on my life probably is Coach Patterson and Coach Phillips. So they even my little brothers, Christian and Christopher. Christian's at UNI right now. He actually was a 2-time national champ for me. And then Christopher, he wrestles at the University of Nebraska. Both of them are 3-time state champs in Florida. And yeah, like Coach Patterson and Coach Phillips, they coached them and helped turn them into the young men they are today. So
yeah, and I think that we all have coaches who have these impacts, and they instill something in us to take to where we are. So do you think that some of the mental things that, as you're mentioning with Coach Pugh and Coach Patterson and all these coaches, some of the things that they did to mold you are, and I might have kind of mentioned this earlier about like, do you take some of the stuff and utilize it as a coach? But do you take some of the stuff that they actually taught you and use it to help build some of these people in such a short time with, maybe the mental state, or like how they may have, answered questions to you, or just like how they went about, interacting with you? Like, do you take some of those things to help build these kids up and know how to like utilize? I guess the best way to say is like, do you take some of the stuff that they taught you and put it into these athletes on like a personal scale or on a scale to impact them on the same level?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it's, if there's one thing I try to, instill in all my athletes is, you can't, and it's something that all of my coaches pretty much instilled in me is, you're not going to be able to do this forever. Mm-hmm. So, it's wrestling is just a game. It's the lessons you learn from it that really, and you hear people saying saying these things at camps and clinics, but as a young athlete, you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, right. All right, here it's more of the same thing. Yeah. But it's true. It is, and wholeheartedly, it's true. It's the lessons you learn from sports, because very, very few people can make a living off of it. We all can't be Jordan Burroughs or David Taylor. So,
correct.
So, if you're not in the sport, you're not going to make money off it. So it's like, you got to learn a lesson from it. You got to learn these little lessons from it.
As you've kind of developed in being around the state of Iowa and just kind of in that general area, do you think that exposure and resources may be something, I wouldn't say difficult to find or to come across, but is that something that you find maybe difficult being in a state around, as you mentioned, Iowa State, all these Division I schools plus D2 and D3 and all these things? Do you find maybe that resources for you or exposure is hard to overcome, knowing that all these other schools are around you? Or do you guys feel like you're in a good spot just because that you're in that area?
I mean, I like to think we're in a good spot still, regardless of being, in the thick of it. I think, yeah, I'd like to think that I'd rather be here than not be here. So,
right.
I answered your question.
No, yeah, it does. So how do you feel about like where, and I know we've kind of talked in general, but I want to talk about like on the women's side as the women's coach. How do you feel about where women's wrestling stands in 2024, 2025, now versus in the past? And how do you feel like, where do you feel like it's going to go in the future?
I mean, gosh, it seems like in the last 2 years, it just blew up. And, I heard somewhere it's the fastest growing sport in America or in the world. It's either or. But I love to see how it's come. It's definitely helped the sport of wrestling so much. Having it finally getting sanctioned in the majority of states now, and most colleges are getting it now too. A lot of colleges are getting it now too. So, I think it's an amazing thing for the sport. So yeah, I mean, when you look at basketball, there's men and women's basketball, there's men and women's soccer. So it's, why not have men and women's wrestling? Look at the numbers. I think women's wrestling is almost saving men's wrestling.
I 1000% agree. Yeah, I 1000% agree. And, and it's bringing some programs back from literal death, right? Like some schools don't have wrestling, and because of the growth of women's sports, I've seen, and I don't know if it's like an abundance, big level on like numbers wise, but I have seen some schools that didn't have any wrestling program since blah, 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 2004, 2008 or older, that have come back because of the idea of having women's wrestling be a part of that, right? And hopefully it might help to save the program. So I do agree with you there. Do you find it difficult to teach girls who have never been on who've never done freestyle before, right? I know that when they get from folk style to freestyle, it might be difficult for some people in general. Do you find it difficult to, or I should say, do the girls find it difficult to transition from folk style to freestyle, in general, and then let alone in such a short period?
I feel like, it is at first, I'd be lying saying it wouldn't be, it's not a little tough. I just in the room yesterday, I had a girl come off from, soccer season straight into her like fourth practice, and she was trying to escape. She was trying to come out and escape, and I'm just like, no, you don't want to be doing that. You're gonna get tossed. You get souffle. You're gonna get tossed back. And she's just like, right. What? She's like, oh yeah, it's freestyle, and so a lot of it's just breaking the folk style habits.
Yeah.
So it is a little tough, but once they get in a match and they realize that, um, things start flowing a little bit
Right.
better.
And so whenever you're doing, and I hate to keep going back to recruiting, but I think it's knowing that, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with this question is whenever you're looking for a girl to recruit, I mean, are you looking for really good offense? Are you looking for really good like top control? Are you looking for really good defense? I mean, I'm assuming like if somebody's really good off bottom may not be such a key factor, if going to freestyle as it might be in like on the men's side where if they can escape anything, then that's great, right? So like, what are you looking for out of those 3 or 4 main, pieces of wrestling, offense, defense, top, bottom? What are some of the things that you're really keeping an eye on for knowing that freestyle's about exposure versus control?
Same thing, great coachability.
Yeah. Doesn't really matter about how well they are. I mean, that's fair.
I mean, yeah, it's I mean, don't get me wrong. I want man or woman that has great offense on their feet. The majority of freestyle is on their feet. But so it's I mean, yes, I definitely in freestyle. If you're really tough on your feet, you're hard to take down. You're probably not going to get turned. Then if you're good on your feet, you're probably not going to get thrown. Then obviously, you're good on your feet, you're gonna have great infighting skills. Um, so in a broader sense, yeah. I mean, it's.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I know you're good. I was just gonna say that when it comes to overall, though, it really comes down to the character. Regardless of how good of a wrestler they are in high school, it's about who they are on the level of coachability and if they can come in and actually, both listen to you, but also, you don't want to bring in a quote unquote virus. You don't want to bring in a poison to what you're trying to build there if they don't have good character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've had, like I would never speak on any of my, any particular athletes, but yeah, I mean, I've had some men and female that are, they just come in and they try to do things their way, and it leads others down a not so great road. So it's like you say, character's a huge thing.
For sure. And so how do you build, and that leads to this, is how do you build a successful culture on a level of buy-in and mindset? And I like this question, in general, but I find it intriguing for you, knowing that, as you mentioned earlier, it's a revolving door of recruiting, right? They're in and out, you don't have a long time to really build something. How do you do that in such a short period of time? And how do you, keep it consistent every year when it comes to that culture you're building?
So, I mean, a lot of it comes from communication. I mean, they know they're not supposed to be, they know the rules,
Right.
you know what you're supposed to be doing and not supposed to be doing. So, like I said, a lot of it comes from communication with them, setting a standard and sticking with it. Like I said, my first couple years, I had some girls that were, that give me some headaches. Same thing, guys. I've had guys give me some headaches. But the ones that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, they normally don't make it. And what a great teacher. Failure, or watching someone else fail is a great teacher. Yeah. So, like I said, I tell my female athletes and my male athletes, hey, I can't control how hard you work out. I can't control you doing your homework at night. I can't control what you eat. I can't control you when you're out in the match. You guys are young adults at this point, and it's them knowing that, yes, I'm there to enforce, obviously some rules and put in place some things, but they're adults at the end of the day. And it's your job to do what you have to do. My athletes from Florida, I'm like, hey, did you come here to party or to flunk out of classes, or did you come here to graduate and to wrestle your butt off?
Right.
So
do you find it easier to build? Oh, sorry, go ahead. The ones that choose to
do the wrong things, they normally don't make it. So,
right. And do you find it like I wouldn't say easier to build a culture, but do you see maybe like people who travel in, like you mentioned from Florida, do you think that they buy into your culture because of the fact that they move their whole life X amount of hours, right? Probably 18 hours away from home, versus somebody who lives up the street, and then, whether they live at mom's house or they, they're from that community. Do you find the buy-in, ratio a little bit different when it comes to like close to campus versus from far away?
That's actually a really good question. I would honestly say that just depends on the athletes. I've had ones
Right.
from Florida that come here and they're gone in a couple of weeks, and then same thing with the kids from Iowa. So
Mm.
it just depends on the athlete. That really heavily depends on the athlete because an 18 19-year-old kid at the time, they're not going to really understand the weight of what they're doing right now, just
Yeah.
because they're still like, I mean, they're not kids, but they are in a sense still.
Yeah.
So it's hard for
Right.
them to grasp it.
I gotcha. So, how do you build a successful program on level of wins and longevity? So, and then how do you sustain that over time? Right. And this could be like in a general sense from 2 year school, 4 year school, high level, low level, middle school, right? Like, how do you build a program to win? And then how do you sustain it every year?
Well, I mean, I don't take wins as I really don't look at it like that. I look at it
Okay.
as first of all, in a competition aspect, this is all of its practice till the national tournament. I've seen
Fair.
athletes that's where their breakout tournament is. I'd rather you peak at the right time than win every match up into the national tournament and going 0-2. And winning when I first started coaching, I wanted, I want to win a national title, team national
Of
title,
course.
this and that. And don't get me
Of
wrong,
course.
I still do. I 100% still do. I still got that drive in me to do that. But winning is more of a sense of seeing these athletes graduate, get a degree, and then, like I said, becoming good people to society. Functioning members to society. Because being good mothers, being good fathers, and like that's more of a win for me. The older
Right.
I get. So, um, I know that's not
Hey,
really answering your question.
no, you're good. I think that everybody has what makes their program successful, regardless of if it is wins or if it's more of just like, obviously, I'm not, as you said, you're not discrediting the idea of winning a national championship as not a goal. But at the end of the day, right, you want, and I'm assuming this is important to you too, right? You want a kid, and this is probably very small compared to what you're mentioning, but if a kid does go to the next level, you want them to be a good person for that next coach. You want them to be a good person in the classroom at their next school. You want them to be situated better mentally for them to when they go to that 4 year or wherever that next stop is in life, because of what you taught them or what they experienced at NIAC versus what they might have not have been if they didn't go through with you. So, like you said, I think that winning it's a very, I should say, quote unquote, success is I won't say necessarily a vague term, but I can see where you're coming from on like what you would consider successful.
Yeah, don't, like I said, yeah, I'll repeat myself. Yes, I want my athletes to win every single match, but it's not like, it's not going to happen. You're not going to win every single match.
Yeah,
So it's, so I measure my wins differently the older I get.
yeah,
Um,
which is fine. I mean, and I actually really appreciate that too because there's more to, as you said, everybody's got to hang up their shoes at some point. So how are you going to be when you get to the real world? And that's an important piece of it. So I mean, so what kind of advice do you have for new or struggling coaches? Coaches who might be new to coaching, who don't really know, whatever it might be that they're experiencing, right? They might be struggling to get wins. They might be struggling to get people to buy in. They might be struggling just mentally as a coach, right? As you know, and we all know that coaching takes up a lot of our time, regardless of the level you are. So, I guess in general, what kind of advice do you have for those coaches?
there's an old saying, the grass is greenest where you water it, so if you truly are putting more time in to learn your craft, more time in to be a better coach, and, you know, it's the, it, your first 5 years, it might not be great seasons. I mean, So, it's a slow progress. With a high school
Right.
coach, it's like, a high school coach, if you want to have a successful high school program, you need to get a little kids program started.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to get, these kids coming in high school as freshmen to place in the state or win the state tournament. I'm not saying it's impossible to do that. It's not, but you're going to have to cram a lot more into a short amount of time rather than, and like I said, that's watering. That's watering
For
so the
sure.
grass grows green right there. Um, that if I was a high school head coach, my first thing would be, and I know I'm going to be here forever. I need to get a kids program established. I need to find a good, responsible coach, or if not, I got to run it for the first couple of years till I can find someone
Yep.
to do it.
Yep.
So that's one thing. Putting time and energy into your craft so it can, pan out to something you want it to turn out to. But it's not gonna take a year.
Of course.
It's not gonna to do it right. It's not gonna take a year.
And so, do you think that when you got to like was college coaching something you always wanted to do? I know we kind of skipped over that, but I know you said it kind of fell in your lap when it comes to like how you started coaching. But was college coaching after you dove into it and after everything, and even at that time at Clarksville, was college coaching something that was that something always on your mind whenever that coaching first came into play? No.
No, not. I mean, no, none whatsoever. I wanted to be a firefighter originally.
Oh, wow.
I was actually in EMT school and still being a high school that was my main goal. I wanted to be a firefighter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And now you're here. So this leads to my final question, and it's the question of the podcast. It's why do you coach? Why do you do this?
I coached to change lives, to change and improve lives, because that's what coaches have done for me. So if I can do a fraction of what my coaches have done and what the sport of wrestling has done for me, that's what makes me, a happy person. Even if it was something where I'm not coaching at Nyack anymore, I know that I'm going to be a coach somewhere. I know that I'd be coaching, helping out somewhere with the sport of wrestling.
Right.
I don't plan on leaving Nike or anything. It's like that's what I plan on always doing. I plan on always having wrestling. And even when I'm an 80-year-old man, I plan on having wrestling in my life somehow.
Yeah. Do you think that, for one, I love that. I love that. I love your why and your reason for doing all of this. Um, just for S&Gs, do you think, and you may not want to do it now, it might not even be something that's ever crossed your mind, but like, is going to maybe like the quote unquote next level as a coach something that you've thought about, or are you just kind of, you're happy where you are and you don't really, it hasn't really crossed your mind?
So going, what is a coach, you said?
Like to the next level, like is going to like a 4-year school, something that you've thought about doing?
Well, I mean, over the years, I've had quite a few Division One NAI jobs, some head NAI assistant Division One jobs come across my desk, or get some calls from coaches. I to be honest, I'm right now. For right now, I'm happy where I'm at, and I still have not won. I told Steve when I got here, I want to win him a national title.
Yep.
I couldn't do it as an athlete myself. Um, so I told that to Steve, that's, I want to win him. I want to win him a team national title. So yeah, I mean,
I like
so
that.
that's,
I like it. You got some unfinished business before you even consider it. I love that too. That's cool. You're in the right place. You got a lot of really good athletes up there, and I'm rooting for you every year. I'll be definitely paying attention to what you got going on this year.
send some athletes my way, man.
Hey, I'm trying to, man. I'm keeping an eye out, brother. Every single athlete I get that considers it, I'm sending it your way. You're one of the first people I'm sending it to, especially on the women's side.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, man. Every year there's some girls out here that definitely have talent to go to the next level. And, like even this last year, whenever you and me spoke, or maybe it would have been earlier this year, like around summer, I try to dive into the girls, and guys too, if they want to go to the next level, but I try to dive into their mental state before I ever send them off. Right. And, at the beginning, they like to do it, and whatever the outside sources may be, some of them have changed their minds, and some of them, they buy into what's going on, and they go into, right. And there's a few girls that I really thought could go to the next level, and they're still seniors this year, so I'm hoping we can swap their brains a little bit, or change their mind, just to say a little bit. But leading up to it, they said they didn't really want to, and so. But there are some girls from not only from my state, but Arizona and Colorado that have some really really good talent that I've either talked to their parent. Most of them I've talked to their parents on, or I have friends with them on Facebook, and as they're developing, I'm definitely. Trust me, I got the spreadsheet ready to send off, so I'll send it your way for sure.
I appreciate that. I was going to say, the line of work for me is Mexico is going to be there. That New Mexico is always going to be there. Arizona is always going to be there. You can always come back home.
Right.
That's what I always say. You can always come back home.
And that's
so that might be a good line for you to let out. Appreciate you having me on. It's been great talking with you.
Of course, man. I appreciate you being on here as well. And Coach, as I mentioned, thanks for taking your time today, man. Love to have you back on here, maybe sometime after season, right? And we could talk. I'd love to dive into a little bit more behind the scenes with you, and I think that'd be a really good conversation for sure. If you guys are still listening to this podcast at this point, if you're on YouTube, make sure you guys HTB, hit that bell, like and subscribe. Y'all know what to do. If you're on PocketCasts, Spotify, audio listener, whatever, make sure you guys leave a star, leave a review, whatever you say with your chest. We want to hear it. Coach, I really appreciate you jumping on. With that being said, thank you guys for listening. Peace.